Welcome back to Gold Derby. I'm Christopher Rosen. I'm so pleased to be joined by Tony Kushner, the Pulitzer Prize winning writer and two-time Oscar nominee, whose new film is Steven Spielberg's adaptation of West Side Story. Tony, congratulations on the film. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks.
There's a great profile of you in the New York Times at the end of last year. You had a very funny anecdote. You said when Steven told you like a few years back that he wanted to do a remake of West Side Story, you went home and told your husband, "You're not going to believe this. He's lost his mind." It's an incredible response, because I think that is definitely like a response that you would have when you hear somebody wants to remake West Side Story. Once the shock wore off, I guess, like what was the first, how did you come around to thinking like he didn't lose his mind, or like what made you want to like take the leap, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of funny because I hadn't realized, I think, until the film came out and I started looking at some of the responses, that I wasn't the only one who thought that. I mean, I had sort of I don't have any social media accounts or anything, so I hadn't been following, and I think Mark had been protecting me from this kind of steady drumbeat when the movie was announced and when we started filming it, that basically what on earth is he doing and why is he doing this? And so I was surprised when one after another the reviews said, well, I have to admit I thought that this was going to be a complete disaster. And then I remembered that I had kind of felt that way too at first. I think that the answer is simply that I got caught up in the work itself. It was just an incredible privilege and enormous joy to sit down every day with that score and listen to those songs and think about those characters and think about the story. I've always loved the musical a lot, and so and also, Steve and I talked, as we usually do when we're starting a project, a lot about what we're thinking about, why he wanted to do it, what it was making me think about. And, I think I've told this before, but he set me some, interesting challenges. Like in one of our first meetings, he said, I don't know if I should be doing this unless I can come up with an idea that for America that could possibly equal what Robbins did on that rooftop in the original film, because it's one of the great film sequences ever. And he said, I mean, what do we do about that? And I said, well, it's interesting that it was originally an argument between two groups of women in a stairwell. It wasn't a sort of hot, sexy, political / flirtation dance number on a rooftop. But we both agree that wasn't necessarily, going to a stairwell wasn't particularly interesting cinematically. And we'd been talking for a couple of weeks as we were getting ready to get going on the project about film musicals that we particularly loved. And we both discovered that we really loved Carol Rice's film of Oliver. And Steven said that his favorite moment in that was the "Who Will Buy" dance number when the whole this whole square in London comes out and starts dancing around. And so I went back. I had just seen Oliver about a couple of years before this, but I went back and I looked at that number in particular, and then I thought, oh, that would be interesting. I mean, then I called him and I said, what about this is an idea that it's the whole Puerto Rican neighborhood in San Juan Hill, and it takes place in the morning, and it and we do it as a a way of sort of getting to meet this entire sort of newly arrived community of people in New York, and it would be a way of walking through some of the issues that the community was facing, primarily dispossession and dislocation. And he loved the idea, so we got excited about different ways of approaching it. It became, I think, clear pretty early on that there was a lot of room for new invention. It didn't feel at any moment like, well, that's a little bit of a stretch. The song wasn't intended to do that. How will that really work? We weren't torturing the original material, the source material, into some kind of new bizarre shape. it really seemed to be welcoming in a weird way. Like, it said, okay, this is a good, well, it turned out that it could absorb a lot of new thinking and still stay West Side Story. And
Yeah.
it's fun.
Yeah, I mean, like, it is truly remarkable. I feel like it is, like, from the minute one, I felt like you really get like the proof of, like, I don't know, like, I feel like the way your script contextualizes and really kind of establishes not just the stakes, but like the relationships and everything. And I love the just the opening scene, like when you get the shot of like Lincoln Center being built, right? And like, obviously, like that, these guys, the Jets and the Sharks have already lost, right? And I think that is something that the movie like kind of really hones in on in a way that the original maybe does not as much. And I just really love that. I guess, like, when were in these early conversations was that something that you unlocked, like the idea of like the dislocation, like you were saying, or like, was that like a key theme that you latched in on? Because obviously that's present in the original, but I think the way you do it in this is just so much. It's just so, I just loved it. I just thought it was so nuanced and like really good.
It's sort of, in a way, it's present in the original, it's not present in the original musical at all. And it's present in the original film, first film, the 61 film, but only in the sense that it was actually filmed on 64th Street, and they stopped the demolition to give them a backdrop to film. And then everybody had already been moved out of those buildings. And then they tore them down after the movie was done. And there is this one moment when the Jets run up a sort of berm, and the Sharks are waiting below and throw garbage at the Jets. And if you look really quickly beyond the Sharks and the Jets, you see what looks like Hiroshima after the bomb. I mean, just this kind of wasteland all the way to the river. And that is, in fact, the destruction. But it's never acknowledged that that's happening. In 57, when the musical, I mean, they started working on this musical really in the very late 40s and early 1950s. It was going to be a very different kind of thing. But all the way up to when they finally figured out how to do this and created the musical that premiered in 57. This was all before the demolition of the West Side had really gotten underway. So it wasn't, they figured, I think, that they were taking on enough by taking on issues of racism and issues of violence and trying to do a modern version of Romeo and Juliet, and they didn't need to add in urban renewal and urban, dispossession and the forced moving of populations and so on. So, Steven said in one of our, I think maybe our very first meeting, he said that as much as he really loves the 61 film, that there's a kind of romanticism to the way that it's presented, and that he had always had this inclination to wonder what it would be like if it really felt like these were teenagers living on the street, especially with the Jets, or the Puerto Rican side of things. The Sharks are supposed to actually be upwardly mobile. They're working, they're getting jobs. The Jets are sort of a different, they're kind of street trash. And but Stephen said, I mean, the poverty that's a part of this story, and the difficulty of life in this story is not as evident as maybe one would wish it in the original film. And then I said, well, and in fact, all their houses were being torn down and they were being pushed out. And I did some further research, and he got very excited about this idea. I don't even know if we actually understood how big a role it was going to play until we started filming. And then we built an entire 3 or 4 or 5 block area of the destroyed West Side in Paterson, New Jersey. And that was, for me, when we moved to that set and I looked around and all this rubble. I mean, just Adam Stockhausen and the set dressers had done this astounding job of creating, urban landscape that was being plowed under. And then I think it really began to occur to both of us that we had created a kind of third character, in a new character in the film, which is sort of Robert Moses and the Committee for Slum Clearance, and
Right.
These giant forces far beyond the control of either of this little nasty group of racists or this group of new arrivals to New York trying to find a foothold. And both are going to be, sort of swept away by forces that are, much larger than any of them could hope to fight against. And I think that adds a kind of poignancy and power to it.
Yeah, I do. I really did love that a lot. I love that. I thought that's such a great tweak to it. And then, I mean, the themes, obviously, I just think the way you flesh them out are so great. The characters too, I just love. I feel like, again, I'm not trying to besmirch the original at all, because I'm a big fan of it. And obviously, like, it's an incredible classic and the songs are great and everything. It is good. But I was like, I think it's a mix of the way you wrote the character of Maria and also having like Rachel being an actual teenager playing it. But I just found that the entirety of Maria feels so much more authentic, not just because of obviously the ethnicity of like Rachel and like having like a proper, and having her sing and all of that. But I think just the way you have her like feeling like a real teenager, I thought was like really impressive. And I just I don't know, I guess, can you talk a little about that? Obviously, you're not a teenage girl, but obviously you're able to write so well. And I think like, I just thought that the way.
Again, sometimes I feel like a teenage girl. I mean, the in both the original stage musical and they carried this through into the 61 musical, the Tony and Maria are kind of the good kids. Tony has a job and he has a family, and there's a sense that he's being pulled into, there's a risk of him he's trying to grow up, and the Jets are pulling him back into, his adolescence on the streets or something. And Maria is, a new arrival, but she's there with her mother and her father and her brother. The whole family is there. I felt that was, that's been a kind of a problem with both of these characters. I mean, Tony starts out singing three of the greatest songs ever written by anyone for any medium. He sings Something's Coming, Maria, and Tonight. And yet the part has never really been considered to be a particularly exciting part. Maria has more to do and has a farther journey to take from, but she's set up at the beginning in the original musical very much as an incredibly naive young girl. And there's a little bit of a 50s feeling of that these are the good kids, so it's okay to root for them. And everybody else is maybe a little bit more, iffy. And that sensibility is dated and not of great interest. Also, I really spent a lot of time with Romeo and Juliet when I started working on this. There were things about the musical that always worried me. Like I sort of feel bad saying this, but I don't believe in love at first sight. I'm a big believer in lust at first sight. I think you can think that you've fallen in love with somebody, but I think real love has to do with a meeting of souls and minds and hearts and circumstances maybe, and not as much to do with whether somebody's hot or not. I mean, but the fact that you find somebody hot can help you get into a situation where you'll get a chance to get to know them better. And the idea that these kids meet in a gym, they dance for 5 seconds, and then they're on a balcony singing one of the greatest love songs ever written, always was, I loved it. I would go along with it, because how can you not? I mean, that song is so unbelievably magnificent. You just have to surrender to it. But that seemed a little bit bogus to me dramaturgically. And then I went back to it. I thought, well, I know Romeo and Juliet pretty well, but I went back to it again. And I thought, what does Shakespeare do? Because Shakespeare always does everything 100 million times better than everybody else. So I went back and I really spent some time with them and with the lovers. And the two things that I really learned is that they do actually fall in lust. They are really taken with each other as, on a physical level. And then they sort of begin to pretend to be madly in love, and then they fall in love. But it really takes the play for that to happen. They're also very, very young. I mean, Juliet is supposed to be 13. The other thing is that, as is the case, for instance, with Desdemona in Othello, the teenage girls are powerhouses. Juliet is a much more exciting and compelling figure. Romeo is an amazing figure, but he's kind of a sulky boy. I mean, he's just dumped his girlfriend, and now he's in a bad mood. And then he meets Juliet, and in 2 seconds, he's madly in love with her. And he's all sorts of wonderful things, but he's not Juliet. She has the most magnificent speeches. She really drives the entire plot forward. She's such a great portrait of a teenager. She doesn't know that when you die, you really die. She gets that it's scary, but she doesn't really get that it's forever. So she's a little turned on by, I mean, she's frightened and turned on by the idea of taking that drug and waking up in the crypt and all that stuff. I mean, it's an amazing portrait of adolescence. Then I went back to West Side Story, which is in its way really a genuine work of genius. I mean, you have two great geniuses, Stephen Sondheim and Leonard Bernstein, working on it, and two other artists of incredible talent, Arthur Lawrence and Jerome Robbins. And it really is clear, again, that there's the beginning of a tender flirtation. Then they meet on the balcony scene, and what happens in the balcony scene in West Side Story is very much what happens in Romeo and Juliet. They fall into the idea of being in love. They start play acting the idea of being in love, and by play acting, it starts to lead them. But they don't really fall in love until One Hand, One Heart. That's when they realize that this is serious in a way that they've never experienced before. And I think it's in Sondheim's lyrics. I mean, he was at times would denigrate any lyric he wrote for West Side Story. Some of them he really hated. I think he was wrong in every case, and I told him so many times. And I told him that he was really wrong about Tonight, because yeah, there's something clumsy about, today the world was just an address, a place for us to live in, no better than all right. But what's genius and daring about those lyrics is that he doesn't try to write flowery, sort of bad. He had a real allergy to anyone. He found one of the most unforgivable crimes in terms of lyric writing was to ever write, you are the sudden breath of springtime that blah, 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 trembles on the brink of a lovely story, whatever, that sort of Jerome Kern stuff. He didn't like that. But he certainly was a writer capable of writing anything. If he wanted to get really poetic there and lyrical in a grown-up way, he could have. He didn't. It stays, it's a teenager's idea of how to express. It's a very young guy trying to say something huge is happening here. And so I'm going to reach for suns and moons all over the place. I mean, it's really, and I love what Ansel and what Rachel do with the song in the movie. What Stephen let them do is that I think that you hear them kind of, in a way, at the highest moments of Tonight, hearing themselves and a little bit feeling, and Rachel occasionally during the balcony scene that precedes the song sort of smiles at, like, this is kind of silly. What are we doing? We just met. And then something starts to take over, and they're caught.
Right. Is that part of why I want to ask you too? So obviously another change you make is that you give somewhere to Valentina, the character who's new character, refashioned Doc, who's played by Rita Moreno. Incredible moment. And I felt like that was like, watching it, I was like, wow, that's a real risk, because I feel like that's a foundational Tony and Maria song. But then it totally pays off and works. And I'm fascinated that it works, honestly. I was like, still like. Well,
yeah, I mean, I don't think I'd have had the nerve to suggest it if it weren't for the case that it actually isn't a Tony and Maria song in the original musical. I went back very much to the original musical because I had issues with the way that they rearranged the songs for the movie. We didn't do exactly what was the case. Like, we left Krupke. I, at some point, wanted to put Krupke in the second act, which is where it was originally. Steven said, that's when he called me up and he said, "You're out of your mind. No, we are not doing that." And there was the one time, the only time that he's ever said that to me, and all the time we worked together was just, he's usually very patient, even when I come up with nutty ideas. But this time he said, "Just drop it, forget it." No, absolutely. And actually, I know now, he didn't explain why at the time, but now when I see the movie and I see the velocity that gets built up by not having a big number after Somewhere, I think it really adds to the sort of the terribleness of the ending. I mean, the heartbreak and the terror of the ending. In the original, there's a dream ballet. Tony and Maria go to sleep with each other, and there's a Dream Ballet, and in the Dream Ballet, fantasy soprano, originally Riri Grist from the Met, comes out and sings somewhere, and then Maria does it as a reprise when Tony's dying. And so I thought, we're not going to do the Dream Ballet, and I don't, I'm sure Rachel and Ansel would have done a fantastic job with it, but it felt like it was a little bit of I could maybe play around with that, since it wasn't originally them. And as soon as Steven had agreed to the Valentina rewrite and doc, and I thought, wouldn't it be, I mean, you've got Rita Moreno in this movie. Of course, she'll be great in all the dramatic scenes, but she should sing something. Mm-hmm. And I thought, oh, somewhere. The minute I suggested to Steven, he said, I love it, absolutely. And the only problem was that then, Steve Sondheim waited until we were deep into filming before he mentioned to me, he'd read the script many times and we'd worked on it together. And then he said, you got a problem in that since Valentina is singing somewhere and Maria's never heard it, how does she know to sing it when Tony is dying? And I said, well, I don't know, Steve, it's just in the air. And he said, oh, well, that's a terrible answer. And, ugh. And I said, well, I'll have to figure something out. But then I thought that somewhere is what she sings to him when he's dying. There's a place for us, somewhere, a place for us. He's about to go. And she's a Catholic, but there's not a lot of evidence that she's deeply religious or that he is. And I felt like, promising that we'll meet together in the afterlife in heaven feels a little sort of Victorian and not quite plausible. And I thought, is there something else that she has sung that she could? And then I thought, oh, only you're the only one for me forever. And what she can say to him is, I'm never going to forget you. I will never get over this. You're going to be inside of me forever. And I thought that was good. And I went to Sondheim and I said, what do you think? And he said, I wish I'd thought of that. Made me very, very happy.
That's awesome. So, I mean, it really is incredible. And it does work so emotionally. Another thing, I mean, like another change you make, I think that works really well, especially to bring up, like you said, the tragedy of the end. I think everything you do with the Chino character, I loved so much.
Oh,
and
good,
it's like,
yeah.
It's so good. And it's so like, especially he's not not to besmirch the original, not the best character in the original musical, or the movie musical, at least, right? The 1961.
Well, he's kind of a function. I mean, he's there to enact revenge.
Yes, but and this, the way you take him here, obviously, is like he's such a nice guy. He's such a believable. I love that he's like a believable match for Maria, which I think is really great. And you could like see a world where she would be like into dating him, not just like forced to date him and like be with him in a relationship, but then to have him have that downfall. And like, can you talk a little about like, when did you decide to do that with like, it just, again, I think one of the things I love about the film, you take such care with all these characters and you show so much empathy to all of them in a way that I found really like, it helps heighten the tragedy and like, it just makes it so real, I guess, or for lack of a better word. Can you talk a little about that and like writing that character?
Sure. I mean, you already said it in a way. I felt like it would be really devastating if you felt that Chino might be, a real candidate for Maria, that there is a whole other way that this might have gone, and I also felt that what I felt that I needed. It was important to me that Chino, becoming this killer, this guy that that we need to know two things about him. One is that he's a shy guy who meets this magnificent young woman and thinks that he has a chance with her, and also, and maybe more importantly, that Bernardo is his best friend, and that his relationship with Bernardo is as deep as Tony's is with Riff's. And so that's why I started developing him. When I was going through the dance at the gym, I for all of the songs and all the dance numbers, I went through when I was writing the screenplay, like blow by blow by blow. I in the original screenplay there, I talked Steven through, a lot of things changed, and he changed them obviously when they were filming, but I felt that I needed to say, here's what's happening moment by moment in these numbers. And so when I was doing the dance at the gym, there was this one sort of goofy, sort of wild little thing about 3/4 of the way through the mambo. And I thought, what if that's Chino's big dance? What if he has like a dance that he's like a wallflower and he doesn't want to dance, and then he suddenly realizes that he's going to lose Maria, and he just jumps on the dance floor and decides to go for it and makes a complete fool of himself, and she loves that. And that's when she sees Tony for the first time, and everything becomes, and
Yeah.
The machine gets set in motion. But I also have to say, we got so lucky with casting, because we got this guy, Josh Rivera, who shocked me after the first couple of days of filming with him. He said, I went up to him and I said, Josh, you're an absolutely astonishing actor. And he was in the road company of Hamilton. His training is all music theater. He didn't think of himself as an actor, but he is an absolutely brilliant actor with an immense heart, and can just go anywhere that you ask him to go. And and I feel like you see this person descend into a kind of fugue state, into some real place of madness after the double murder at the Rumble. And I think I'm glad you asked that, because a lot of people, want to talk about some bigger parts, but I think what Josh does with Chino is phenomenal.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, honestly, and I think it's a great swing from your script too, because I'm like, you put a lot of not pressure, maybe is not the right word, but obviously he's such a key factor in the end. And if that is not working, that character, that performance, I don't think the end lands as well as it does, but it does just bring in, it's I felt like that's a big, maybe not it's not a risk, but I don't know. I thought it was really interesting that you decided to do that, and then to have that payoff is makes it so much better.
I mean, I have to give credit where credit is due. I wrote in the screenplay originally an ending that was very much like the original, the ending of the film, which always makes me fall apart and cry, and the bell ringing and the lifting up from the whole of the West Side, and the theme from Somewhere comes in, and you just lose it. And I love it a lot. So that's what I had written, and Steven said, great. And then we were filming the ending at 2:00 in the morning on this set in Paterson, New Jersey. And all of a sudden there's Steven is having Chino walk. I mean, he has Valentina come out, and I saw Rita on the set, and I thought, why is she even here? She's not in the script. I don't think she was in that scene in the script. And then she's going and picking up the gun, and she's walking behind Tony's body with Chino in the car. And I was like, I ran up to Steven and I said, well, what are you doing? What is this? And we got really annoyed with each other, which happens from time to time. But I backed off and I said, oh, whatever. And then the next day he showed me what he had filmed, and that shot through the bars of the fire escape. And I was, this is why I love working with him, is that I don't think he intended to do this until the moment that we got onto that set. And then he knows how to pull it together in 3 seconds. But it made the ending so much tougher and so much less forgiving in a way. I mean, it's asking you to stay with the really ugly realities of racism and death and loss that are at the heart of the tragedy. And he, I think he sometimes gets an unfair rep for sort of wanting to make things. He even makes fun of himself sometimes, finding happy endings where there aren't happy endings. But when Steven knows that the ending needs to be unhappy, he'll go there, and he really did. I'm so. I mean, there are a million things that he did in this movie that I think are just beyond belief. And in fact that he directed a movie musical for the first time at 74, and it looks like he's been directing it all his life. I mean, it's spectacular. The direction is magnificent. So
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I mean, the movie is unbelievable. Like you said, I think like it maybe surprisingly people were like Steven, like we're like, I don't know, were people like, oh, not expecting it to be as good as it is. The movie is incredible. It's like your script is great, the direction is incredible. I think it's like definitely was one of my favorite movies of the year, and it's definitely one of the best I've seen. And it's one of his top, in the top echelon of Spielberg movies. And you've written a bunch of the, at least two of my personal favorites too. Munich and Lincoln obviously are two awesome Spielberg movies as well. And I know we
have another one coming out in Thanksgiving.
Yeah, so. Fabelmans, right? And I know that's so, and that
a big surprise for everyone.
Yeah, so I'm very excited for that. Tony Kushner, we have to wrap up here. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. It's great chatting with you.
Real pleasure.
Thank you.